Welcome to this week's episode of FTK Feature Focus. This week we have another special episode with a special guest, Dan Sumpter, who's the principal instructor at Exterro over North America. Dan, how you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, always good to have you here. And what we've got Dan on to talk about today is Project VIC. If you're in the law enforcement industry, you've probably had to deal with cases dealing around child pornography or child exploitation, child trafficking, all those types of different things that break down and go into those different areas. Of course, we have different names for a lot of the same thing. Fortunately, unfortunately, right, Dan? In my law enforcement career, while I worked cases that dealt with that, I never dealt with Project VIC. For whatever reason, the organizations that I worked for, Dan, we just didn't interface with it. But I know you did. Right. And so here we are. And so Dan, tell us a little bit about Project VIC.
So in order to even look at Project VIC, even find out about it, a lot of people don't even know it exists. First thing, you got to be law enforcement. I mean, it's hands off, and if you're not law enforcement. So even to get involved in that, you have to be a sworn officer in some aspect. But Project VIC, it's what it is. It's a collaboration of a bunch of people's work, law enforcement's work, and it's a collection of hash values of known child exploitation videos and pictures. And it's housed, so to speak, at the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children. So that's where all of these hash values, are at or disseminated from. And remember, it's just the hash values, not necessarily the pictures or videos. But so I wanted to get into that. I wanted to, when we got into forensics, I knew that was going to be part of it. I needed to take that next step to be able to have access to, the software and the hash sets and everything. So I got involved with the Internet Crimes Against Children organization here in Cleveland, Ohio. And once I got hooked up with Dave Fratier, who's the guy in charge over there, who still is, nice guy. He got me involved with the training classes. He got me access to ICAC Cops, which is a website strictly for this. You're heavily vetted. You're heavily trained, in being able to access this stuff. Once you get access to it, though, it's a plethora of information and tools. And I really can't get into exactly what it is, as far as that goes. But just to know that we are able to identify pictures and videos based off of a file signature or a hash from a file signature in the file itself is amazing. So Project VIC is just another tool for us to identify these exploitation videos and pictures and identify that on a suspect machine or suspect media from being identified in the past by law enforcement.
Yeah, I think that's super important because the saying's often, like every time these images are shared, the victim is kind of re-victimized, right? That's kind of the idea here. And yeah. Project VIC is another tool to help stop that victimization by rapidly identifying victims that, yes, this is this, and ties it that this is confirmed contraband, and hopefully stopping the spread of it, slowing the spread of it, right, through the internet.
I'll tell you, it probably spreads more than we think because there is new releases of hash sets all the time. It's updated on a constant basis. So, that's officers that are uploading, more known videos and pictures that have been shared that weren't there a week prior, that it's just growing in size all the time.
And this can be so we had a podcast a little bit ago where we talked with someone who deals with trauma with investigators as well as victims, and using hash sets like this can help speed up investigations. I think helping reduce the amount of time an investigator spends wading through garbage. Did you find that in your experience as well?
Yeah. So, but it's like during your investigation, and then at the end, if you happen to come across new hash values that aren't in the system, then it's on you to identify what's the content, write a synopsis of that content, and then upload it later. But during the investigation, yeah, I could, run an image against, our no file filter that I used, and it would tell me, hey, this one's no good, this one's no good. It just started alerting me on the suspected, files. And, maybe I don't have to look at all 1,000 of them on this guy's hard drive, and I just need to pop out 10 known, files that are already, confirmed by the system to keep me from having to watch an entire video over and over again, So yeah, it definitely helps with my, my mental, well-being.
Yeah, we can't let it go any more further down, can we, Dan? Well, yeah, those types of texts are super helpful, and we have been working to implement tools to obviously incorporate that help into things like FTK. And so this is FTK Feature Focus. And so what we want to do is take a look at how FTK kind of allows the investigator interface with that. Now, as you mentioned earlier, we can't show things dealing with the ICAC Project VIC NCMEC side. That's highly controlled. But what we want to show is what FTK does that helps the investigator to categorize and create their data set to either give back to Project VIC or to get it organized. So
yeah. So with FTK, what's nice is these hash sets come to us in a JSON file. So it's nothing more than a glorified text document, so to speak, right? That document does nothing more than organize data for us. It doesn't do any sorts of programming or nothing. So it just holds those values for us, and then we will input those into FTK using our no file filter tool. So it's way easy. We teach it in our 101 class. We teach it in our 201 class, so it's used a lot. And yeah, depending on the size of that JSON file, it might take a minute or two, but then we'll import that as a known file filter, and then we can apply that. We can run that filter before we make our case, pre-processing, or you can do it later on and run it against specific files that you have in your file list or check mark or filtered out so you can see them. So it's pretty robust when you get those hashes thrown into FTK.
Oh, perfect. And one thing I will say is you talked about how, all the services provided to law enforcement are locked down. I should say the same thing with FTK. You do have to have a law enforcement tag on your license to access the Project VIC features. And so if you are law enforcement and you're like, hey, I don't have this, contact your sales rep. They can get that flag added to your license so that you, of course, have access to those features. We want to make sure that, law enforcement has access to that. So, Dan, do you think you could at least show us how to bookmark and the features associated with that Project VIC bookmarking here in FTK?
Yeah, I can. Let me share my screen here, and I can knock that out. So as you see here, I have FTK up. I did most of my investigations when it came to child exploitation videos and pictures, either from the videos tab or the graphics tab. So I'm in the graphics tab now. And I just have some random picture up, and we can just pretend that this is a child exploitation photo, right?
I'd be concerned if it wasn't a random photo.
Yeah, we might get in trouble if it was otherwise. But so it's really easy. A lot of our users already know how to make bookmarks. A lot of times, since some of the training, when there's not law enforcement in the training, we kind of skip over the Project VIC stuff, and we have a little button here next to our little multicolored labeling button. We have this it says VIC real small. If you can't see it, that's what it says. So you can hit that once you have a file check mark highlighted or selected, or you could just right click as well, and then we have create a Project VIC bookmark here. So there's a couple ways of doing it. And if you're familiar with FTK, there's a couple ways of doing everything in FTK, which is kind of nice. So there's no wrong way of doing it. So this is specifically for Project VIC's content. So for instance, let's say that picture is what we wanted to bookmark as a child exploitation video or picture. As you can see at the top, you have your bookmark name. We can fill that out. I could write, whatever the file name if I want, or, something, child video, child picture, whatever I wanted to put in there that's relevant to that file. The Project VIC case number is next. That usually comes from your ICAC COPS account. So let's say for instance, I see something that's in there and I want to conduct I want to take over or start an investigation, then a case number will be assigned to it. So I'll use that case number in here and add it to that. Just another way to file, all of these, files that we're actually going to be looking at. But one of the biggest things here, we have a drop down for categorization. So in Project VIC, those hash sets are categorized themselves. And so you have animation, you have child abuse, child exploitation, and we have comparison images, non-pertinent, or maybe something's just uncategorized that you saw on there, but and you think that it's probably child exploitation, not too sure, or there's just not a category for it. If there's not a category for it, then I usually make a separate bookmark, and then I'll put everything inside that bookmark. So you'll have a sub bookmark, so to speak. So maybe if I had, you don't see anything, it doesn't say actually videos, like comparison images, maybe comparison videos or something like that. I would want to add that. But if this was exploitation, you can mark it as such, and then you could put your information in here. My name would be Dan Sumpter, my contact phone number, my work email, a title, and the department that I work for, right? And then once I make sure I have my target item selected, then you'd have another shot here to change that category if you didn't already at the top. And then you could add some tags too. So here you can add, well, is this going to include, an infant? Because in the federal system and in some state, courts, the younger a child, the worse the offense is. Or is it just violent and not, include those? Or is it the SNN, the bondage type of stuff? So you have additional tags as well. And then you always have room for a comment if you want to put some more information in there. That's up to you. And then once you pick your bookmark, then you'll be able to save it and hit OK. And it'll show up in the bookmarks tab.
And just to clarify, the categories and the tags, those are populated by the organization, Project VIC, NCMEC. That's not something that the user here in FTK creates, right?
No, that's automatically populated from theirs.
Right.
From their hash sets, yep.
And then the other thing too is this is not a single file at a time required, right? You could do all checked files, all listed, that sort of thing as well. Yeah,
and then the one thing that most law enforcement guys don't do or forget to do, or it's a lot of work doing a case like this in the first place. But yeah, I could select this whole list. I have 21,000 showing. I can check mark them all and throw them all in that one bookmark if they were all related to that type of investigation. But the one thing guys don't do at the end, they make the report, they copy all their evidence, they send all their reports and evidence to the courts and put it away for holding. The last step in all these cases is uploading your hash sets back to Project VIC so that they can add those if they're not already in their system. So for instance, let's say I identified, a bunch of pictures or videos that maybe some guy took on his own, created on his own. Those are probably not known, right? Well, I can hash them myself using FTK, and then I can put all of those files that I know that aren't in the Project VIC hashes and list them here in this file list, and then we can export this file list and upload those hashes to NCMEC so that they can be used for the next guy, or maybe I'll do another case down the road and it'll hit on it again. So that's that last step that a lot of investigators, I don't know if they forget, but it's just, sometimes it's just overlooked.
Yeah, you're on to the next case as soon as you've done that one.
Yeah,
It's just like I got to go to the next one, and I'll upload it. Yeah. But
yeah, I'll
then
get to it. Right.
that tomorrow is code for never.
Right. Yeah.
And then the cool thing about it is that with your contact information, like you were saying, you found this stuff that was created by this person. If they had any questions as to the case or needed background information, that would allow an investigator down the road to call you up or email you or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, and plus, if you and I are both have access to, the same, accounts, like ICAC cops, we can look up that case and look at everything that you did in that case. And I can, say, oh yeah, this video was already marked, or this suspect was involved in this case. So there's a lot of, interconnectivity, so to speak, with investigators with this, these resources.
I think that's important. I think networking and communication between investigators on the good side has been a topic both in like law enforcement style forensics as well as corporate and agency forensics lately, and incident response is trying to get the people on the good side that are protecting to communicate more, because the bad actors definitely don't hesitate to communicate with each other and network and build these undergrounds.
You'll see if you start doing a lot of these cases, you're going to start seeing, the same images, the same collection of videos from one guy to another, because they're just sharing it between each other. And, they're using, those peer-to-peer networks. And so, unfortunately, a lot of those collections, so to speak, are recognizable just by the name of the folder, and I'll be like, oh, not this one again, So it does. When you start getting into the job, you'll know exactly what you're expecting to see when you open up a folder due to the naming.
Cool. So that's Project VIC, right?
Yeah,
in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously there's a lot more to it, but if any of the investigators out there want to get involved in this, a lot of people are like, no, I'm never going to do that kind of work, right? But if you think about it, like you said in our opening, these victims get re-victimized over and over again. And if it's a baby, a toddler, a little kid that can't talk for themselves, that if you can get comfort in knowing that you're their voice, then it makes it worth it at the end of the day when you find the bad stuff. And I'm going to tell you, most of those guys don't want to go to trial when a forensic expert finds evidence. They're pretty quick to, I'll just take my 15 years and go to prison for, or for longer than that. So that's, that might not be what everybody wants to see as far as the end result. They might want to see something worse or something longer. But when you could get some kind of justice for those victims, and just to add a little tidbit to that is that there are, part of NCMEC, what they do is the reoffending, like you were talking about, and re-victimization. There are victims out there that are older than you and I, and their child exploitation videos are still being shared, but there have been funds set up, or like a suspect that has been fined in court, millions of dollars, whatever. And any time that re-victimization happens, that victim gets compensated. And I know a lot of those victims donate that money back to the National Center. So that's something a lot of people don't know. That no, they're not actually putting the money in their pockets and going shopping. They're giving it to this organization to help the next victim.
That's great. And I think that's a great coverage of Project VIC and the good that it does. And I think our training department is doing their part as well. I think we've offered some free training for law enforcement, or are offering coming up here, and at your new on location stuff as well.
Yep. So we're offering right now for the next 3 weeks. I think we got a couple weeks every month where we're offering FTK Imager for law enforcement professionals. I'll be teaching that as well as one of our new instructors, Kate. And then on the UK side, I know Daz and John are going to be teaching that in London at the London office. So, yep, we have a new facility in the Covent Gardens in London, and then here in the U.S. in Frisco, just outside of Dallas. So keep your eyes open for law enforcement only classes there too. We're going to try to get something organized very soon for that.
Perfect. The thing I like about Imager and the fact that, people may think, oh, it's just Imager, but the cool thing about Imager is it can create hash sets that are compatible with submitting to NCMEC. So it's a free tool out there in imaging. Get the training that you need so that you can, at least at minimum, create the hash sets of a drive, a jump drive, a couple of images, a folder, and again, get that information to the people that can, archive that and help us do more about it. So
yeah, for sure. I think it's a good tool. Everybody knows about it, and everybody likes the price. So I like it too. Before when we were new at this, I had several copies of it sitting on a thumb drive somewhere. So yeah, definitely. But it's a powerful tool. It can do what we need it to do, and taking that extra step to get those hash sets is pretty important for closure of the case for sure.
Cool. Well, Dan, thanks again for jumping on an episode of FTK Feature Focus. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Yep.